What are you? When you think, who is the one doing the thinking, and who is the one observing it? This internal monologue, this private sense of self we call consciousness, feels like the very definition of being human. We assume it has always been this way. But what if it hasn't? What if, for millennia, human beings walked the earth without this inner world? What if they experienced reality in a way so fundamentally alien, we can barely comprehend it? And what if the voices they heard, the ones they called gods, were not external divine beings, but came from inside their own? This is not a work of fiction. It is a radical and deeply unsettling scientific theory that rewrites the very history of human thought. It suggests that our consciousness, our self, is a shockingly recent invention, born from chaos, catastrophe, and the silence that follows. In 1976, Princeton psychologist Julian Jaynes published a book that sent shockwaves through academia. It was titled, The Origin of Consciousness in the Breakdown of the Bicameral Mind. Its central claim was as simple as it was paradigm-shattering. Ancient people did not have. Instead, Jaynes proposed, the human mind was once bicameral, meaning two chambers. In this model, one part of the brain, the right hemisphere, would generate auditory hallucinations, voices, which were then interpreted by the other part, the left hemisphere. Imagine a world without introspection, without agonizing over decisions. When a challenge arose, a voice, clear as day, told you what to do. The voice of your king, a dead ancestor, or a god. You wouldn't question it, you would simply obey. This was the reality. This theory explains so much that history leaves as a mystery. The unquestioning faith, the building of massive monuments for unseen deities, the absolute power of divine kings. It wasn't just belief, it was a neurological reality. To find evidence, Jaynes didn't look at fossils, but at our oldest stories. He turned to the epic poems and religious texts that form the bedrock of civilization, and what he found was a stunning absence of the one thing we take for granted, an inner life. Consider Homer's Iliad, one of the oldest works of Western literature. Its characters do not sit and ponder their choices. They don't have internal debates. When Achilles is about to draw his sword in rage, the goddess Athena appears, visible only to him, and tells him to stop. Throughout the text, when a hero needs courage or a new idea, a god breathes it into them or speaks to their heart. There is no language for thought, for mind, or for soul in the way we understand it. There are only external stimuli and divine commands. The same pattern appears in the earliest parts of the Old Testament. Abraham doesn't weigh the moral implications of sacrificing his son. He simply hears the voice of God and obeys. Moses doesn't formulate a plan to free his people. He receives explicit, step-by-step instructions from. These weren't metaphors. Jaynes argued they were literal descriptions of human experience at the time. The world was a stage of gods and men, where men were the actors and the gods were the directors, whispering every line, every action, from the backstage of the right hemisphere. But how is this neurologically possible? The answer lies in the very structure of our brains. The two hemispheres are connected, but they specialize in different functions. The left hemisphere is dominant for language production, the logical, analytical part of us. This is where you are processing. The right hemisphere is more holistic, involved in pattern recognition, spatial awareness, and metaphor. James theorized that the language areas in the right hemisphere, counterparts to those in the left, were the source of these divine commands. They were the God part of the brain. Under stress, this right hemispheric voice would speak, sending a signal across the anterior commissure to the left hemisphere's language centers. The left brain, the man part, would experience this not as its own thought, but as an external. And we see echoes of this today. Studies of patients with schizophrenia, who experience powerful auditory hallucinations, often show heightened activity in the right temporal lobe when they hear voices. They are, perhaps, a tragic glimpse into the So if this bicameral mind was the default state for humanity for thousands of years, what happened? Why don't we hear the voices of gods anymore? The answer, according to James, is catastrophe. Around 1200 BCE, the ancient world was plunged into chaos. The Bronze Age collapse saw massive migrations, climate change, famines, and the fall of great empires. The stable, predictable world that the bicameral mind was built for, disappeared. The old gods, the voices that gave commands for planting crops and fighting. In a world of chaos, with strangers who had different gods and different voices, the old system broke down. You could no longer rely on a simple command. You had to navigate a complex, new reality. Humanity was thrown into a state of cognitive panic, and in that panic, a new way of thinking. At the same time, a powerful new technology was spreading, alphabetic writing. For the first time, complex thoughts could be recorded, stored, and examined externally. This created a feedback loop. People began to create an internal, narrative space to think and This new, internal space is what we now call consciousness. It was a software patch, a desperate adaptation to a world where the gods had gone silent. We learned to talk to ourselves because the gods would no longer talk to us. We created an analog, I, to navigate a world that was You can see this transition happening in the texts themselves. In later works like the Odyssey, the hero Odysseus is cunning, he lies, he plans, he reflects on his own thoughts. The gods are still present, but they are now advisors, not commanders. The book of Ecclesiastes in the Bible is a profound example of this new consciousness. It is a deeply personal, introspective, and even cynical exploration of the meaning of life. It is the sound of one man thinking to himself. It is a But did this bicameral mind ever truly go away? Or does it still linger, a ghost in our cognitive machine, waiting for the right conditions to emerge? James argued that we can still see its vestiges all around us, in the moments when our conscious Think of the artist lost in a creative flow, feeling as though the inspiration comes from a muse outside of themselves. The religious prophet who receives divine revelation. The soldier in the heat of battle who acts on instinct, without thinking. Are these phenomena echoes of that older, more Hypnosis, for example, creates a state where the subject willingly cedes control to an external voice, following commands without the usual internal filter of the conscious self. It's a temporary, controlled return to a bicameral-like state, where the voice of the hypnotist becomes the Even the simple act of reading a novel immerses us in the consciousness of another. For a time, our own inner voice is quieted, replaced by the narrative voice of the author. Our desire for this experience, for art, for music, for religion, may be a deep-seated nostalgia for the certainty and guidance of the theory of the bicameral mind is not without its critics. Many archaeologists and neurologists find it too speculative, a grand narrative that stretches the evidence too far. But its power lies not in being definitively proven, but in its ability to force us to ask profound questions. It challenges our most basic assumption, that the way we experience the world is the only way. It suggests our vaunted self is not a permanent fixture of human nature, but a fragile, recent construct, built on the rubble of a forgotten world where humans walked with gods inside their heads. The next time you hear that quiet inner voice, the one that guides you, that argues with you, that narrates your life, pause for a moment and consider the profound, deafening silence from which it was born, and the terrifying possibility that for most of human history, this theory recontextualizes our entire existence. It suggests our modern anxieties, our feeling of being alone in the universe, is a direct consequence of this cognitive shift. We lost the certainty of divine guidance and gained the burden. The implications are staggering. It means that history is not just a story of changing tools and empires, but a story of a changing mind. The very software of human perception was rebooted. We are a different kind of animal than our ancestors. It also offers a new, and perhaps more compassionate, lens through which to view mental illness. Conditions involving auditory hallucinations may not be a broken brain, but a resurgence of an ancient, now maladaptive, cognitive function. A ghost of a past operating system. While Julian Jaynes's theory remains on the fringes of mainstream science, its influence can be felt in philosophy, art, and literature. It serves as a powerful reminder that the reality we perceive is not absolute. It is constructed by the brain, and the architecture of that brain. It forces us to confront the possibility that our current state of consciousness is not the final step in evolution. It too may be a temporary solution, a stepping stone to another way of being that we cannot yet imagine. A future where we might once again change the very nature of what it means to think. Ultimately, the bicameral mind theory is a profound thought experiment. It acts as a mirror, reflecting our own consciousness back at us and asking the most fundamental question of all. If this self, this I, was constructed, then who, or what, was the architect?